In this tutorial, we're going to learn some of the basic tasks in SAS Studio. So the first thing we want to do is launch SAS Studio. Once we're in SAS Studio, we want to make sure that we're in the visual programmer mode. Notice that we can toggle between SAS Programmer View and Visual Programmer View using the upper navigation panel. Over on the left side navigation panel, you may see some of the server files and folders that you created during the Programming 1 Essentials course. We're not going to use that data or those folders during this tutorial. I'd like to direct your attention to the Tasks and Utilities tab, and here is where all the tools are that we're going to use for using SAS Studio. In this list of tasks, we have data-related tasks, and if I expand that, you can see there are several that we can do. We also have graphing tasks, mapping tasks, and finally statistics. We're going to be mostly using the statistics and the data tabs, but we'll also be using some of the graph tabs. We won't be using maps in this class. As fun as it is to use maps for presenting data, that requires data that has latitude and longitude, and we simply don't need that for the purpose of teaching basic statistics. As you can see, there are a lot of different tasks listed within SAS that can be performed in Visual Programmer mode. In this class, we will only be covering a subset of these tasks. However, you will find that the process of performing a task is very similar across tasks, including creating a user window, specifying analysis variables of interest, listing any options, and you'll find that these are very similar across different types of tasks. To get started, we first need to find some data to work with. For this and several tutorials to follow, we're going to use a dataset that is preloaded into the SAS Help library. We're going to go down to Libraries, My Libraries, SAS Help, and within the SAS Help library, we're going to find a table called Heart. Go ahead and select that, and you'll notice over here in our viewer panel, the data set itself is appearing. What we're seeing here is the first 100 rows of data. And if we scroll across, we can see all the different variables that are captured within this data set. And we can also see some of the values for those variables across the first several rows. So each row represents a single observation or a single case in this cohort study. In this case, it's individuals who are recruited to participate in a longitudinal cohort study, the Framingham study. Notice in this view, we have columns which represent the same columns we see here in the table. We can click on these columns and get a little bit more information about each of the variables. In this case, we can tell that the variable status is a character variable, meaning it contains text. It also says the length of the variable, and that's how many characters it will allow within that field. So there should be no text that's longer than 5 letters. We can cheat a little bit here and see that the values for status are dead and alive. We can't be certain that those are the only values just by glancing at our data, but if we scroll down, or if we were to run a frequency on status, we can see that those are the two possible options. For the other variables, you can see that there might be a little more helpful labeling, but again, the cause of death in this case is a character variable, in which case they've allowed for 26 characters. We're not going to focus on the character variables right now in producing descriptive statistics, because measures like the mean, median, and mode, and the standard deviation and variance are only going to be useful for interval level and ratio level variables. Now that we've opened up a data set, we're ready to start using some of the tasks and utilities. So click on the Tasks and Utilities folder, scroll down to Statistics, and you can see there are some sub-options. The first one we're going to focus on is Summary Statistics. In here is where we're going to be able to generate our descriptive statistics, the mean, the median, the mode, standard deviation, range, and so on. Once we've clicked on the summary statistics option, it's going to create another window within the viewer mode. In this case, it knows that we're interested in looking at the SAS help.heart data. If it did not automatically appear there after opening the dataset, you can also navigate to it using this interface. Now that we have data, and we've looked a little bit at our data, we want to select an analysis variable. You may want to widen this area for now so that you can see all the different options. So under this data screen, we're going to select our analysis variable, and we're going to start with the age at start. Age at start is the age at which the participant began in the cohort. And we just want to calculate some descriptive statistics around the value age. So we've selected age at start. Now, if we notice here, if we look at the list of variables, it does not include all of the variables that were in the data set. That's not a mistake. This is only showing us the numeric variables in the data set. That's because the summary statistics task really only applies to numeric variables, and it won't even let us run the task or this procedure using a character variable. So we've got a variable, age at start, and you'll notice here in the right-hand navigation, or the code, it's already started to generate some SAS code. Right here is the heart of what we're looking at, the proc mean statement. And let's look at this statement a little more closely. We have our procedure step, proc means. We have our data step, which invokes the SAS help.heart table. So that's the heart table within the SAS help library. And to the right, we have our options. And what's listed here are the default options for SAS proc means within the summary statistics in visual programmer mode. So it's asking for us to produce a mean, a standard deviation, the minimum value, the maximum value, n, meaning the sample size or the number of observations. And this piece here with the variance definition, it's how we're going to calculate the variance. This will also affect how we calculate the standard deviation. This setting we actually want, this is to calculate a sample standard deviation. And we also have this variable statement, or var, and we just specify the variable that we're interested in analyzing. Notice that each line of code ends with a semicolon. One of the biggest errors in SAS coding is either forgetting or misplacing a semicolon. It won't run properly and will give you an error message if it's missing. So for running this program that was generated using this summary statistics tool, we can simply allow SAS to generate the text code over here and then run that program. We can also select what we know is the relevant portion of the code, select that and ask it to run that. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and click on the little running man. And it gives us exactly what we wanted, at least as we specified in the code. So we have the mean, the standard deviation, the minimum value, the maximum value, and the total sample size, or n. Now, in this case, we're interested in more descriptive statistics than the default setting. This is where the Options tab is going to come in handy. So under Options, we're going to see all the things that can be produced using the summary statistics feature, which is built around the proc means command. You can see that mean, standard deviation, minimum, maximum, and number of observations are there by default. And this was reflected in the code that we just produced. I'm going to also ask it for the median. And I'm going to ask it also for the additional statistics, the mode, the range, and I'm also going to ask for quartiles. Specifically, I'm going to ask for the lower quartile and the upper quartile. Notice the median was already checked because I checked it above, but that'll give me my Q1, my median, and my Q3, or upper quartile. And I'll also select the interquartile range. So notice if I go over to code My code has become somewhat more complex. It's simply added additional measures to the list of measures that I would like to calculate using this proc mean statement. So this time when I run that code, it's going to give me a more extensive output. We still have our mean, standard deviation, minimum, maximum, but we now have the median, the mode, the range, the lower quartile value, the upper quartile value, and the quartile range. As we can see, the range is simply the difference between the minimum and the maximum value. So a range is a single value, and it's simply the difference between the maximum and the minimum. The interquartile range is the difference between the upper quartile and the lower quartile. So while it's convenient that SAS is able to calculate these for us, it's relatively simple mathematics to derive each of those measures. The other ones take quite a bit more math, especially the standard deviation and the mean, especially because we're calculating that over 5,000 records. Okay, so we've already achieved our first task using this single procedure, proc means, to derive central tendency, the mean, median, and mode. We also have several measures of spread, including the standard deviation, the minimum and maximum value, the range, the interquartile range, and the upper and lower quartiles. You'll notice here that we also have an information tab. If you want to learn more about the SAS means procedure, there's extensive documentation available through the SAS help website. It'll give you examples of using the code, using the syntax, all the different options that are available within the SAS proc means command. And it's always a good idea to look at a few examples to get an idea of some of the ways in which people use the code using different types of data sources. For now, we're going to focus back on SAS Studio. The output, the only thing here is that we could create a separate data set that simply contains these values. In this case, we're not really interested in doing that. What I will suggest doing, however, is keeping the code that we used to generate our final analysis. To do this, I'm going to simply select the text for the relevant code, copy it. I'm going to go over to SAS programmer mode, and I'm going to paste that syntax in there for future use. This allows me to take what I've learned in the visual programming mode over to SAS programmer mode. And I know now that all I need to do to modify this is, for example, I could select only the standard deviation if that's what I was interested in, the mean, and so on. So it would be a simple matter of modifying this text. I'm not able, however, to modify the syntax in the visual programmer mode. So it's very useful in that way. Or you can also save that program into one of your folders that you've created. That's it for this lesson. Next time, we'll look at using the graphs.